Welcome to A Celtic State of Mind. I'm Paul John Dykes, and today I am delighted to be joined by Lawrence Conley and Patrick McGilp. Welcome to the show once again, guys. Yes, for anyone out there who's wondering where wee Deck is, he is moving to a Thursday, so you can catch up with Declan. I know he's got a massive fan base out there, Patrick, but I'm pretty sure you'll be fine running without your wee buddy, if we can call him your wee buddy, that is. Right, let's talk about the game last night. Patrick, what was your thoughts?
Phenomenal, absolutely breathtaking in the first half. Second half, we just controlled the game. But what a start for Maeda. 4 minutes in, I don't think anyone. I think only Gary Mackay-Steven has had a quicker goal on his debut. Partick Thistle a few years ago. But I mean, it was a fantastic performance, and I think the 3 weeks off have done us the world of good, because you can see the energy that we've got. The pressing was absolutely spot on. Just a great performance. And if we play like that for the rest of the season, I think we'll be going to good places.
This is a big thing. We were talking about it before we came on, Lawrence and I, around the fact that we all appreciate when Ange came in the summer, the job he had on his hands was massive. I mean, particularly after the carnage that was last season. But he didn't have enough time, really, to craft that team before the first competitive game. So throughout this season, I think what's happened is there has probably been occasions in every game where he's had to play a player that maybe doesn't fit his system. But what we've started seeing is if you buy in a player like Hatate, for example, and we'll speak about him in a wee bit more detail throughout the show, and he's been identified by Ange because Ange knows he fits the system. What a difference it makes, Lawrence.
Yeah, huge. I mean, phenomenal debut from him. For such a versatile player, he certainly played midfield really well, didn't he? It was, his movement is unbelievable. I mean, it must have been murder for Hibs to try and mark him. Yeah. But listen, Hibs came out and they had to go, I'm glad that we're getting him after Maloney's only had 3 games in charge. I think another 5 or 6 games under him, they'll be a really dangerous opponent. You could say if Nisbet had his shooting boots on, they'd have been a closer game. But yeah, Maeda and Hatate, everything you could want in debuts from them, isn't it?
Well, like everybody, Lawrence, I was talking to as many people as I possibly could to try and build up an idea of the types of players we were getting when we signed all 3 from the Japanese league. And of the 3, it was actually Hatate that seemed to be the low-risk one. We knew about Gucci to a degree because he had spent some time in British football. We knew that the deal to Leeds United didn't work out. We know all about Maeda because apparently some people were surprised he wasn't the top of the shopping list when Ange Postecoglou came into Celtic. Perhaps he was, but the deal couldn't be done at that time. But Hatate was the one who, and again, when you look at the transfer fee, once it's converted, he's going to cost us £1.38 million. Less than £1.5 million. I mean, value for money. I'm deliberately not going to get too excited after one performance, right? Because, I mean, last season, the players came in and they looked really good and they're no longer part of the plans. But in terms of the value for money, when you're looking at that, Patrick, that's a market that I don't think, if the players come over on the same kind of level as Kyogo and Maeda and Hatate, I don't think that market will be as cheap moving forward, will it?
No, I think we have certainly exploited it up until now with the 4 players we've signed, but I don't know how long that can continue, especially if it's us going in for the players, But Ange just mentioned other markets, like I think it's Iran. I don't think we've signed anyone from Australia yet, the Australian league yet, so there's other markets for us to look at. But, if you're going player for player, I think Hibs were wanting more than $3 million for Martin Boyle, and we're getting a player like Hatate for 1.38, I think you said, so it's an absolute bargain. And with guys like Ange in, I know we've now got that French analyst in behind the scenes as well. If we can look to these other markets and find a player of similar quality but for less money, it's a no-brainer, really.
The thing as well, Patrick, we've heard Ange talking about the fact that he does have this system in the early days, and I think Acsom fell into this trap as well. It was being called Ange Ball. Not quite sure what that was. We've seen certain performances clicking into to place, and we were destroying sides a couple of times at Celtic Park. But there was flashes of this. There was a 45 minutes at Easter Road. There was a half a performance against Betis away from home. And you were looking at it thinking, well, I can start to see what Ange is trying to do here. But going back to my original point, he was doing it with players he had not identified as being suitable for his system. And I think the more players that he brings in, the more we're beginning to see this style that Ange has been talking about. Was that as close to what we have seen last night in terms of the finished product? Is that as close as we've seen it?
I think so. You mentioned Hibs in the first half. That first half at Easter Road was absolutely phenomenal. I think last night probably tops it. I don't know what it is with first half against Hibs this season. We seem to play really, really well. Mm-hmm. I thought second half at Easter Road was actually a bit poor. We controlled the game, but there was times where we looked like conceding, I thought. Whereas last night, I thought we looked pretty comfortable all the way through. Actually, when Kevin Nisbet manages to not score in the 4th minute last night, or the 2nd minute, that was the only chance Hibs had, I thought. But to answer your question, I think that's probably the best all-round performance you've had. Hard to compare when you've won 2 games 6-0 at the beginning of the season.
Yeah.
But, the first half was absolutely breathtaking. I mean, the energy, the way the crowd was feeding off it in the 10 minutes before the second goal, it was absolutely phenomenal.
And what about the players feeding off the fans, Patrick? Was that palpable last night as well?
I thought so. I mean, it was about getting back into the ground after a month, and, it was the first home game, I think, since Motherwell 5 weeks ago. 2 guys making their debut. One of them scores within 6 minutes or something. It was just a lot of excitement about the place, a great buzz about the place, and I think you can feel a real connection. And, I think Ange spoke about that when he first came in, with fans going back into grounds for the first time in 18 months. Celtic hitting a bit of form again with those 6-0s. The players were feeding off the fans and vice versa. And you can feel that again. And I think that'll be crucial going forward, because there's definitely something missing when there's no fans there. So going forward, if there's 60,000 every single week, I think it can only benefit us.
Yeah, you're right. Now, we're not going to labour this fact, Lawrence, but last season, not only did we have a lack of fans in the stadium, no fans in the stadium, there was no real challenge. There was no real pressure. The title was won by a team who were never really put under any pressure. And I think that, the very fact that we've got the 3 points on the board going into tonight's fixtures, there is a bit of pressure. There is now a bit of pressure on the league leaders. And that's all we can possibly do. Do you think, though, that is, it's not a conspiracy as such, but that is something that might affect Rangers this season, the fact that we are breathing down their neck?
Yeah, definitely. Listen, Aberdeen will feel hard done by. I think it was a late Ibrox penalty that they didn't win there. So they maybe feel the old Rangers. It is, see how they handle it, in front of fans, away from home. But listen, I think there's pressure on Rangers now, but there's also pressure for places in our team. Previously, you're maybe thinking your midfield's McGregor and 2 others. Now it's McGregor, Rio, and there's 1 place up for grabs. The forward line, you could similarly say now it's Kyogo, Maeda, and 1 place up for grabs. Yeah. So the pressure within the squad to do better and to get the kind of level of performances we delivered in the first 45 is surely going to spur us on.
Well, I think it's a great point, because I don't think that Ange has had that luxury of having the selection headaches, Patrick, that he might now have. I mean, it's good dilemmas for a manager to have. And this, as I say, going back to the point I made originally, this is without Gucci, who is potentially as good as, if not better, than what we've seen last night. So where are we with the midfield in your eyes, Patrick? I know that David Turnbull's injured, and I'm not about to write him off. Absolutely not. I've seen some criticism coming his way this season. I've had some people commenting on the section. Let me know what you think if you are watching live, saying that maybe it doesn't fit Ange's system per se. Where are we in terms of the midfield then? What's your first pick midfield? And I know we're only basing it on 1 performance by Hatate, but in terms of first picks, is Turnbull now looking at that and he needs to fight to get his jersey back?
100%. I mean, I'm a massive fan of David Turnbull, but he's not getting in the team if that's the way that Rio Hatate is going to play every single week. And you know what Rogic can do, and you can't drop McGregor. So I think that's a midfield three. And you know, when it comes to midfield options, games like last night, you think to yourself, "Oh, we've actually got loads of options here. This is brilliant." You know, full of quality players. If Turnbull needs to come in, brilliant. He's a good player. If Gucci or McCarthy or Beaton need to come in, brilliant. Decent players. Then all of a sudden you get into early February. Rogic's away on international duty. There's a question mark over all 4 Japanese players. Turnbull probably won't be fit in time for the game in February the 2nd. So all of a sudden you've got no options. But, you know, there might be a postponement. Not all the Japanese players might go. There's just, you just can't tell. But if everyone's fit and available, I think last night's midfield three, I think you've got to stick with that.
It worked so well as part of Ange's system, Lawrence. Where are you on this one then? Because, I mean, I'm like Patrick, I'm a massive fan of David Turnbull. In terms of his mobility, he's certainly a completely different player from what we've seen last night with Hatate, who seems to fit that high-intensity, high press that Ange plays.
You know, there was reported interest in Turnbull from the Premiership in the summer, and I think we could see, yeah, you know, if the interest is there again this summer, I wouldn't be adverse to losing him. I don't think he fits the system as well. When you look, I know it's only one game from Rio, but, you know, you've got Rio, McGregor. I'd say Rogic probably is your starter. I think Turnbull's, he's down the pecking order. Not entirely sure he fits the system. I'm sure Ange will have, you know, other players he's got his eye on to bring in. So it could be that he's someone that would sell to raise some capital. Yeah, you know, the Japanese boys aren't costing us a lot of money. If Turnbull's to go to the Premiership, what you're talking 8 or 10 million, you know, that's how many Hatates is that? 6?
That's incredible when you start talking like that. I would be loath to lose him. I'm going to be honest with you. I think some of the conversations I have on a Monday with Tony are that you can never have too many good players. You can never have, and now it's difficult to keep them all happy. And I know that there was a game recently whereby it was one of the it was a Ross County game. We had to, if you weren't lucky enough to be at the game, PPV it for the stream, the match day coverage. And it was Stephen Craigan it was on, who isn't short in telling you that he's one of his pals. He's one of Turnbull's pals, and he talks to him regularly from his days at Motherwell. And he was talking about a player who was frustrated. The way he shaped it, it was a player who was frustrated that he wasn't a first pick for Scotland. And Craigan was suggesting that he had to move down south to become a first pick for Scotland. And he cited John McGinn as an example. I'm not comparing the two players. I'm just talking about the situation where if you go down south, it's almost as if your stock rises in terms of international selection. What do you think, though, Patrick? Is it a case? I would do everything in my power to keep my best players. I wouldn't be looking to cash in on David Turnbull.
No, I wouldn't look to move him on. But, you know, if an offer comes in, I think you've got to consider it. You know, if it's anything above 10 million, you're probably maybe having to go to him and say, do you want this? Anything below 10, I don't think I'd accept, because as good as that midfield three was last night, I personally think Turnbull's the first guy off the bench he turned to if one of them's injured. I think he's probably fourth choice for 3 positions. If either of Rogic or Hatate drops out, I'd be putting Turnbull in there personally. I think now will be the time we see whether he fits Ange's system, because as you said, he's been playing players that he might not have wanted to, and Turnbull started every single game up until he got injured.
Yeah.
So now with options, we'll see how much he actually values Turnbull, because if he's still playing him when he's got options with Hatate and Ideguchi, it shows you that he fancies him as a player. About getting into the Scotland squad, I'm not sure he's going to displace any of the midfield three in the Scotland squad, because Billy Gilmore's at Chelsea, you've got Callum McGregor, who is definitely better than David Turnbull, and so you're looking at John McGinn and saying you need to outperform John McGinn. So I'm not sure how much a move to England would help David Turnbull in regards to Scotland.
No, I think that's a far better analysis than the individual that I referenced, who was commentating on the Ross County game. Let's get some of the comments up then. Urban Coolsey, welcome back. You're a regular commenter on the bulletins, and it's great to see you. You're watching on YouTube. And for anybody out there who is watching the stream. Get subscribing on YouTube. We've got some massive content coming your way, Celtic related, and quite a bit of music and culture as well. Sessions every Saturday night. Music sessions, that is. The Urban Cool Shake. Dogs are settled. I'm on the couch. Wife making lunch. It can only be Acsom time. Well, it was almost late because I was making the tea before we started. I'm a good tea maker, apparently, Lauren. So I was making the tea, and I think we're almost about 30 seconds late. So apologies for anybody who sets the clock by us. Monty, afternoon, everyone, and afternoon to you. Martin comes in as well. We have Irishman in Porto. Greetings from a chilly Portugal. You never know where people are tuning in from, so it's great to hear that you're watching in Portugal. And Dominic, I think you're going to get a kind of buzz and a vibe from the podcast today that we're still buzzing from last night as well, Lawrence. And what it does, I mean, we spoke briefly about it beforehand, is you get the buy-in to what's happening on the park. And Ange, in one fell swoop, takes loads of heat off of the board because, we were looking at the board previous to the January transfer window. He takes a lot of heat off the board, but also you've got to give Michael Nicholson some praise for getting these guys in the door. I mean, they have worked swiftly. And I know that people are looking at the press conference where Ange was asked about bringing more bodies in. I think if the situation arises where we need to bring more bodies in, I feel a wee bit more confident that we're going to do it this time round.
We've had two, I suppose, Ange transfer windows. And the first one was a bit fractious, shall we say. Ange was saying we need to get deals done quick enough.
Yeah.
So, Michael certainly got these ones done quick enough, but perhaps these were the ones that were there to get done last transfer window. I don't know, but credit to Stu, they've come in the day before the transfer window opens. So it looks as if that relationship's progressing. We've spent money in January. It's not a Robbie Keane's joining on the last day or whoever's available for loan on the last day. So we've put ourselves in a good place. We've now got a fairly decent squad. And I guess we're now avoiding the desperation signings, aren't we? We can now pick
exactly
the better players.
And get better value as well, Lawrence. The
Yep.
Desperation signings, like you say, you need a striker in. It's the last couple of days you throw £3.5 million at someone who long term turns out to be a flop. How many of them? We could list them. How many of them have we had? Whereas if you've got all your ducks in a row, like we did with the 3 Japanese signings, you're getting value for money. I mean, we're talking €2 million, and something like €1 million for those €5 million for 3 players. That is incredible when you look at the other 4 who we will be talking about at some stage during the show, who hopefully will offload, who are on big wages, and obviously it costs a lot of money to bring it in. Now, Stephen Creamer, absolutely. I wonder what the panel will choose to criticise Starfelt about today. Well, I can't criticise him after last night's performance. He's on the schedule here because we need to praise him for last night's performance, Stephen. We would never criticise him after last night, and I think it's a good link into that conversation. Before the game, Patrick, Laura and I were talking about, the best defence that we have available at this moment in time. Julien's coming back. He wasn't on the bench last night, but he's coming back in. Welsh was a wanted man, might still be a wanted man in January. Udinese apparently were interested in Welsh. And we were asking, what is your first choice defence? So at centre-half last night, undoubtedly, it's Cameron Carter-Vickers and Starfelt. He's come in for a lot of criticism, has Starfelt. That was one of his most assured performances last night, don't you think?
100%. I think the only reason people sort of, compare him to Welsh or Julian is because Cameron Carter-Vickers has been phenomenal. He's been almost flawless in the past 6 months. And so Starfelt's obviously the weak link, whereas most games, he doesn't have an issue. There's no problem. He was winning duels, winning headers. His passing was fine. He doesn't look like the most natural passer, but it was absolutely spot on last night. Mm-hmm. An absolutely flawless performance, I thought. And, when Julian comes back, if Welsh wants to get in the team, they're going to have to fight for a place because this seems to be the partnership at the moment. It seems to be working at the moment. I know Starfelt had a wee 3-game shaky spell just before the winter break, but he seems to be back on form. And it's just a matter of winning games, picking up 3 points from now on, and the SPFL seems to be able to do that, no bother.
Yeah, and when you're looking at the aerial duels that he was winning, a lot of that goes under the radar until you speak to someone like Alan Morrison, who gives you the stats, and you look at it and think, well, we remember the flaws. You do tend to remember the flaws in a performance, don't you? But I think that even when he's going through the sticky patch, there's a lot of defensive qualities there. So going back to Stephen's point, we will praise Starfelt. He is a first pick at this moment in time. Do you think long-term, Lawrence, he's going to prove any doubters wrong?
Well, to be honest, I've never been a critic of him. And I know you're saying he had a 3-game sticky patch, but with changes at left back during that sticky patch, and he's your left-hand side centre-half, so it's going to affect his performance. We've got the best defence in Scotland, and he's an integral part of it. Julian, I think, 13 months out, I still think we should try and get a loan deal for him. He's 18 months left in his contract. How many minutes is he going to get with us between now and the end of the season? We need to judge whether he's worth another contract. If he's not, you then need to try and sell him in the summer. So what are you going to judge him on between now and May? And I think the only way for him to get kind of the required number of minutes is going out on loan. He's another guy that's on big wages as well. Compared to like Starfelt and Cameron Carter-Vickers, I think he's probably on their wages combined. So, yeah, for me, Starfelt and Cameron Carter-Vickers is definitely the partnership. It's weird, I think, in Scotland that the Celtic defence, especially centre-halves, seem to get a lot more criticism than is aimed at other team centre-halves, even if we've got the best defence in Scotland. Apparently, those are the dodgy centre-halves, and you're going, well, that doesn't really stack up with having the best defence.
Perception over facts, Lawrence. It's perception over, and creating a narrative without the facts to back it up. That's all it is, and you're absolutely right. But it's an interesting point you raised about Julian. We were talking before we came on, Patrick, about some of the guys who may be considered fringe players going out on loan, but they were fringe players nonetheless. They were part of the first team squad. They were contributing more than the likes of Bolingoli and Ayeti and Barkas, etc., and Sorrow as well. So Shaw's away out, Henderson's away, Montgomery apparently is going to be going. Uragidi might be going out on loan. Do you agree with Lawrence that perhaps Julien would benefit from a loan? I'm more of the view, I'm sitting here saying keep all the players. I'm more of the view that, we keep them in-house because of the first half of the season. What that's proved is we're one injury away from a crisis at times. And at that point, yeah, we might be feeling that we're throwing them in. But I'd much rather have him in-house than elsewhere, building up game time and fitness.
I think it's an incredibly complicated decision, really, because, as a 29-year-old, I think he's 29, French centre-half, he probably sees himself as quite an established centre-half. He's playing every single game until that knee injury against Dundee United. What team do you send him to? What team is he happy going to for a 6-month loan? What team would take him when he's been out for 13 months? It's incredibly complicated. I think Lawrence makes a good point. He does only have 18 months left, so we either need to sell him in the summer or give him a new contract. So we need to see minutes from him to see what type of player he is. I know you can see in training, but I think a match day is where you see what a player's made of. So, it's either a loan or he makes his way into the team and we see what type of player we've got. Even in the side of caution, I'd keep him, just because if we put him out on loan, we've only got 3 centre-halves, and I think that's just a recipe for disaster, knowing Celtic's luck. So I'd keep him. I know Alan Morrison seems to, his page seems to think that he's level with Starfelt and Welsh. He could be Carter Vickers' partner next season.
Right.
So we'll see.
Absolutely, and I think that you're right. One less defender is one step closer to playing Beaton at centre-half. And that's twofold, because you lose his effectiveness. Let's be honest, he's been effective as a midfielder this season, and he's not a great centre-half. So that and when you're looking at the actual squad depth, is the best example I can think of, is that, we don't want to be playing players out of position. But we've taken a step forward here, and hopefully we can take another one by the end of the transfer window, because I'm not convinced we're not going to dip back into it. But we'll come round to that now. There's lots of praise coming in for Hatate. No wonder the way he played last night. I was a wee bit surprised, I'm going to say, and that's down to the fact that I was reading a lot from the Japanese football experts about him being the the kind of risk that was worth taking. You know, if it doesn't work out, it's inexpensive. And he basically he orchestrated the game. You know, a range of passing. He had the vision. I commented last night, he had a similar style in terms of body shape and movement to Kyogo as well. I loved the way he glided past players as if they weren't there. He turned on a sixpence, to use an old term that Lawrence will be familiar with, leaving players still facing in another direction. I loved it. I thought it was absolutely tremendous as a debut. But there's a lot of comments coming in relation to Starfelt's performance again. Stephen McGonigal, Starfelt had a great game last night, and in actual fact, David Brown would have named him as his man of the match. There was a couple of candidates. I thought Hatate, you probably give him it because it's his first game as well, and you're buzzing about that. And Paddy Lavery comes in. Hatate, he's my Japanese boy. Now, there was another Japanese boy making his debut last night, though, and that was Daisen Maeda. The pace that boy's got is going to cause some amount of problems. And again, I think of the ball going back, and Joe Hart sometimes he's quite slow and he looks about. Imagine a goalkeeper doing that. An opposition goalkeeper, Lawrence. Maeda's going to be right down his neck.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the boy's rapid, isn't he? Quicker than Agat at his peak, I don't know, but he's up there that kind of speed, isn't he?
He is rapid. I mean, Agat was fast in his day, Lawrence, but we both know he's lost a wee bit of that pace, isn't he?
Just a wee bit of it. I believe that you outstripped him for pace in one game.
It was a defensive overlapping move, like the traditional right back overlap. And I looked behind, he was about 10 yards behind me. He's lost a bit of pace.
But listen, he taken his goal well, the keeper's expecting him to aim for the big part of the goal. He's just cool, calm, collected, and he's went for the small part. Dispatched it well, hasn't he? Him and Kyogo, the amount of pressing that they would do between them,
they will ragdoll defences.
That's what it's based on. It defending from the front, putting the pressure on, attacking, getting the ball back one quickly. I mean, that's where the first goal came from, wasn't it? It was the pressure putting the ball that we ended. Hibs make the mistake, we end up winning it back, and Tom finds Dyson
another assist. Yeah. Cool as you like. See, the thing though, you raised the point there about Kyogo and Maeda playing together. And, I think as a prospect, Patrick, of Kyogo playing off the last man, baffling assistant linesmen with offside decisions, Maeda running down the throat of goalkeepers, taking them by surprise. I mean, in terms of the strongest team, everybody firing on all cylinders, it's a prospect that it's an exciting prospect for Celtic supporters, but it's one that we've not enjoyed this season. We've not seen, Jota hitting top form at the same time as on the right-hand side for it, because there's been an injury, there's been illness, etc. But there's going to come a point, and hopefully in the not-too-distant future, when that clicks into place. However, if it does, how do we deal with the one up top? We're playing three forwards, of course. I wasn't a massive fan, Patrick, of Kyogo playing on the left-hand side, albeit Lawrence, raises the point that he's played far more games in that position than through the centre in his career. Is Maeda the focal point of that front three? Do you then maybe shift Kyogo away from the centre? Does Jota go on the right? There's now options. Where do you think the best options are, though, up top?
It's extremely difficult to drop Kyogo. I could not drop Kyogo. I think you need to start him through the middle. I think you've seen at Ibrox, the game when he was on the left-hand side, I think it was a very defensive performance from them. I just don't think he's suited to the left-hand side. I think it was St Johnstone at home. Yakimakis scored. He was on the left-hand side as well. I don't think it's for him. I know he prefers to play as a striker. I'd prefer him at striker. I thought Maeda was a winger up until last night. After last night, I'm starting to think he's a striker. But, if he can play in the wing, Kyogo can play in the wing, Jota can play either side, I think that's your front three. It's just a matter of where they play, if I'm being honest.
Yeah.
And you're saying about not seeing them together on top form. With Kyogo's injury and then with the Japan stuff, it could be the end of February until we see it. But if it's the end of February to the end of May, you've got a lot of tough fixtures in that period. Bodo Glimt, cup semi-finals, hopefully, big deciding games in the league. What a time to get those three up front together on form. I mean, it'd be a good time to get it. A really crucial time in the season, I think.
Well, You know what Patrick's saying there, Lawrence? We've got a situation now where Kyogo can play through the centre or on the left. Jota can play left and right. Abada can play left, right and centre. Maeda can apparently play on the wing or through the middle. We've got a situation now where you're almost spoilt for choice. Is it a case of just constantly rotating them?
Well, we know Ange likes to change his front three, so I think they're all going to get a chance and playing together, and we'll see, I suppose, what works best. But I think, for me, probably on the team sheet just now, if they were all fit, it'd probably be Jota, Maeda and Kyogo. That's the three you would pick. And they're kind of change during the games. I don't know, Patrick's touched Ibrox, he didn't look that good on the left. But I don't think Ange criticises them for his contribution on the left. I think the problem was the guy we had playing centre forwards, heart wasn't in it. So, it was a lot better to have Kyogo playing as a centre forward than the guy we started with. So
was it Kyogo that laid Edouard on for the guilty-edge chance he met? It was, wasn't it? Aye. So it's a different game if that goes in.
How does he not score that? But anyway, in the past now. But so I think it's 20 games at centre forward before signing for us. So the fact that him and Maeda can interchange, it's going to be a nightmare for defences. The speed of movement, the thought those boys have got, the technique. We've got James Forrest, we've got Abada as well, pushing for places. I think, Giacomakis, he's got to be looking, going, how do I get a chance here? And it is, I think, Ange's changing the front three because they're so hard working in his system. It's where he's got to look to do something in the 20 minutes when he comes on to have any chance again in that team.
Where are we with Giacomakis then? Because we're talking about, having the right fit of player for Ange Postecoglou's team in the way that he plays. Giacomakis, to my mind, isn't an obvious choice as an Ange player. I'm not saying he wasn't an Ange. I'm not saying that at all. If you get the top goal scorer coming from the Dutch top division for £2.5 million, you take him. That's an acquisition, and it's worth taking that. If there is a risk, I think it's a low risk. But he certainly doesn't, in terms of style, Patrick, look like that type of player, does he?
No, not at all. He doesn't strike me as a quick player. Very physical, which is the opposite of what the Japanese four have looked like so far. I think he's a plan B, if I'm being honest. And I know Ange hasn't really had a plan B so far. I know he trusts his system and he wants to play the full 90 minutes using his system because in the long run it will pay off. But at the same time, you've seen St Mirren away, Livingston at home. Our problem when we've dropped points is scoring goals, not conceding them. And every time we drop points, we've always had loads of crosses and it's came to nothing. And I think, Giacomakis, I've always been impressed the way he can win a foul. I think it was Ferencváros home and away, and then last night as well. Last 5-10 minutes, he's winning 3 or 4 fouls. It's absolutely incredible for such a big guy. I think he's actually yet to score a header for Celtic, but I think that's probably why we brought him in. I know, I think he scored 11 goals from the penalty spot for, is it Venlo he played for last season?
Yeah.
And then he took that penalty against Livingston, and it was just, it's absolutely pathetic, I thought. So it's a question mark. It's another question mark. But again, as you say, 21 goals or something in Eredivisie for £2.5 million. You obviously sign a player like that if you can, but then when you see what you've got, it's strange. It's an odd one.
Yeah, I think it was Anthony Joseph who has a Celtic State of Mind, and he tweeted out that the club were looking for something in the region of €12 million had they stayed up. So it's a kind of low risk if you bring that player in. I think it's been unfortunate with regards to his fitness and injuries, etc., that we haven't seen him in full flow yet. But there are elements to his game, Patrick. I agree with you that, he holds the ball up well. He holds the ball up very, very well. But again, that kind of slows the game down sometimes, doesn't it? And that doesn't really fit in. But as a plan B, we certainly don't have a plan B. And sometimes when you're struggling to break teams down and you just want to, with the amount of crosses coming in the box, you just want to have that presence in there. So I think he is a decent enough squad player. He's nowhere near being a first pick, but he is a decent option. Now, Irishman and Porto, thanks for that. I think Declan does look slightly younger than myself, but Paddy's telling me to take a day off. I will do. We will get someone back in on a Tuesday. Trust me, we will have an unveiling. Hopefully by the end of January, we'll be able to unveil a new signing. And Barry McCluskey, thanks for getting involved as always. Acsom not high profile enough for Declan now? Well, potentially, Barry. He's promised me that he'll be in. He'll promise me that he'll be in on Thursday, but we'll see if he gets a better offer before then. Let's have a wee chat then about, there was a good point coming up here. Here we go. Stephen came in talking about Starfelt again. Some Celtic fans have made their mind up about Starfelt and won't praise him regardless. I don't think that's particularly focused on Celtic fans. I think football fans in general make opinions up in their mind and perceptions of particular players. So I'm going to give you an example of one of mine, Tony Ralston. But I like him so much that I'd have played him last night, right? And then you watch the game and you look at the impact and the performance of Juranovic and you put your hands up and say, well, what do I know? Because Ange knows best. Because Juranovic played particularly well, maybe better suited to Ange's system, scores a goal, you trust him to take a penalty and score it. So absolutely there are perceptions, Lawrence, of particular players, and you get stuck in the mindset of he's no good, or the other side, you can't see the failures of a particular player. But let's talk about Juranovic. Is that a signal last night that he is undoubtedly the first choice right back now, and we've got a very able deputy in Tony Ralston?
I think when we bought him, he was bought as first choice right back, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Ralston surpassed everybody's expectations, and I don't think anyone's going to worry if Tony steps into the breach. But I think that's the pecking order just now. 1 and 2. Juranovic is a wee bit more versatile. He can play the other side. He's even played right wing. I think it's maybe all 3 in one game as well. So I think the fullbacks get asked to do a lot of work. So outside of the front 3 getting changed, you can see the fullbacks getting changed during the game. When they're playing inverted, they do have to do a lot of work. So Tony's still going to get game time, I think, throughout the season.
Mm-hmm.
We're not worried. I think before the season kicked off, there was big worry. We're going to kick off a campaign and Tony Ralston's the only right back at the club. It's, those days are far in the past. I think he's convinced everybody, he's definitely good enough for the squad, if not a first team starting position. So
you've got to look at what part has Ange played in that situation then, Patrick, right? So we're going into this new season. What were our right back options? Okay, we had Leo Connor, a young hopeful from Manchester United who had a loan deal and he'd come back into the fray. Yeah, he's got an international cap. We had Tony Ralston, who at that point everybody had written off. Everybody had written Tony Ralston off. And you had Stephen Welsh, who could play right back. He had played there for Morton when he was on loan a couple of seasons ago. And of course you had Urigide, big raw talent from Sheffield Wednesday, who can play right back. So we didn't really have much options. So what he's done is he's taken one of them, a rough diamond, and polished them in Tony Ralston, and he's brought in an international quality player. We're now sitting in January, and maybe not like some other positions where we've got 3 or 4 options, but he's managed to, with one signing, he's managed to give us an option whereby if Juranovic is suspended or he's injured, you've got absolutely no issue with bringing in Tony Ralston. And Ralston has played Ange's system, so although it might not be a natural system for him, he knows how to play it and he can perform well in it as well.
100%, and it's an amazing turnaround. Because he thought at the beginning of the season, right back, that's the first player you sign, because we brought in John Joe Kenny specifically not to play Ralston last January.
Yeah.
And you think to yourself, if we done our business properly last season, get rid of the guy in the dugout and get a proper manager in, maybe he could have helped Ralston along a bit and we wouldn't have had to suffer through John Joe Kenny for 4 or 5 months. But I was reading out the team in the car on the way to the game last night, and my dad said to me, what's up with Ralston? And I said, Juranovic is a better player. And it is unfair, it's unlucky for Ralston, but Juranovic, I think, he's got more potential, he's just got that extra level, his passing's a bit better, he's better in the final third, in my opinion. He can take a penalty, crucial last night. And it's just a bit unfair in Ralston, he's an excellent backup, definitely sorted for cover for right back, and he'll definitely get game time, the amount of games that we play, but I just think Juranovic is that bit better.
It will be interesting to see how that progresses throughout the season, but what we do have in backup, if that's the case, and it looks like it's the case that Ralston's now the backup, is we have an international player at backup, Patrick. I mean, he played so well, he got his international debut for Scotland, he scored goals, he's won over the hearts and opinions of many Celtic fans. There's absolutely no doubt about that. Let's have a wee chat about the opposition then, because during the week there we were up at Celtic Park doing a bit of filming. That film will be released at some point today. in relation to the Willie Maley Newry CSC, who are fundraising to erect a statue of Willie Maley in Newry, and we're doing a big event up at the Kerrydale Suite. So I was talking to some Celtic fans outside the ground, and one of them said they had the vibe that, Hibs play in such a way that we can actually dismantle them. And there was this whole thing that we can maybe take 4 or 5 off them. At half-time, by the way, I said exactly the same last night. But I think the game was managed pretty well after that, Lawrence. And, Sean Maloney, he's been highly rated for some time now. He's obviously left the Celtic kind of youth level in terms of the coaching, got a tremendous job with the number 1 ranked team in the world, learned, I'm sure, loads during international football. And now he's taken the step into the unknown as an a club manager in his own right. It's early days for him, but he seemed to manage that pretty well after an early onslaught yesterday.
Yeah, I think I said previously, I'm happy we've got him after his, so early in Maloney's managerial career, because they showed in spells the pass and the ball retention. I think the only team in Scotland that we've played that's come out with higher possession stats than us.
Yeah, I saw that. Yep.
He's got them playing a nice style of football, and if Nisbet's shooting boots are on, well, he didn't even need shooting boots for that. Listen, I think if he just put builder's boots on it would have went in. I don't know how he misses his chance. So another night, Maloney's thinking if he takes his chances, he could have got something out of the game. So real impressed with the progress they've made under Maloney so far. I know it's 2 wins, 1 defeat, but they'll take points off other teams. I think probably go as far as they're maybe the best team I've played in Scotland.
And of course, it goes back to that discussion we've had on the podcast a few times, Patrick, where sometimes we've had players on the fringes that we've loaned all over the world at times. We've loaned players to Norway and all sorts. And we spoke about trying to make an effort to get these guys into teams within the league. So there you've got a Hibs side there. Lawrence reckons are going to cause problems to anybody else in the league. They might come back and cause us problems later on once they get settled down. But we're strengthening them by Ewan Henderson going there. We're giving them a player who you just never know could do some damage to Rangers at some point in this season. And I think that's something that we need to look at going forward. You're putting players out to the same level that they're going to be coming back to. And also you might be able to damage your opposition.
100%. And, I was slightly disappointed to lose Ewan Henderson, but at the same time, whenever he's came on, he's played well, and then he's just not given another chance. So for him, it makes sense, and the manager sees a lot more than we do of these guys, so it makes sense for him, and you've got to move these guys on. I was unsure about Sean Maloney taking the Hibs job, personally. I'm always quite sceptical of these guys. It's partly down to the fact I don't rate Roberto Martinez as a manager. But, you've seen, Ian Cathro fail at Hearts. I think it would take time. I think I saw Alan Morrison's tweet earlier. It's the first time, it might even be at home or domestically, since Hearts in 2016, 2nd of April, we won 3-1. That was the last time we lost out in possession at home domestically. So... He's obviously doing something right, and he outpassed us as well. I think Lawrence said, they made 30 or 40 more passes than we did, which, coming away from the ground, you never thought. But, they've obviously tried to build something special. And unfortunately, we just had the superior players in the night, because you seen with the first goal and the play through our chances we had in the first half, we pressed them, we got the ball, took our chances and won the game. And it's a shame for Hibs, but I'm sure they'll do well this season, and hopefully against some other teams get a few big results.
Oh, definitely. Magnet 67 comes in. Similarly, Ange is building something special, although fair play to Hibs for trying to play football and not sitting in. You're right, we're just further on in the development of that build. I'm sure Sean Maloney and Hibs are building something as well. Celtic follower comes in on YouTube. Welcome to the show, sir. The speed and composure shown last night is on a level we haven't seen in a long time. And when I was watching that, just like everybody else, it was just incessant, Lawrence. It was just non-stop. And I think that it gets to the point where you've got players who are coming in who are playing at that kind of level and level of tempo. I mean, Maeda, he knows Ange Postecoglou. They've worked together in the past. He knows exactly what Ange is expecting. He comes in. What does that do for other players who are maybe not quite at that level? Do you think they can come up to that level? I mean, we've seen players in the past completely evolving as footballers. We've spoke about Turnbull. There's no way that players can't develop. Is a player like Turnbull, or is he just not mobile enough? to play at that level of intensity?
Listen, to get into the team, he's going to have to improve, isn't he? It's improver that you're going to get moved on, unless you can play the level that Rio showed you. You're not going to be getting in the midfield. It's that simple. You're not going to be starting games. If you're not starting, I think then it's down to squad management for us. And that's what I was saying about Turnbull earlier. I think a lot of times he passes and he's a bit ponderous with his movement after it, whereas Rio was just doing it instinctively. He was passing, he was moving, he was by his marker before the marker knew he was going by him. It's going to be really hard for any midfielder to pick him up with his speed of thought and his movement. He looks a really clever player. I think, if I've got players that are more ponderous, they're not going to fit in the team or Ange's system as well. We've spoken about it as they're not going to fit in the Ange ball as well. So we've said that, Turnbull perhaps doesn't look like an Ange player. So I think he maybe needs to learn to adapt. Like Tony Ralston didn't look like an Ange player, but he's learned to adapt.
Is Rogic adapted?
Has Rogic adapted? I think Rogic has got a level of fitness that we've never seen before. And whether that Ange seems to say, look, as long as he's happy, Rogic will give you that. Because if you remember pre-season, he didn't play much under Ange, but it's probably understandable because Ange had managed him before. And he's probably the guy he knew most. That is the squad. But what would it do for Rogic playing with Rio and McGregor? I think that's going to be phenomenal for him.
Well, we're talking about players, Patrick, adapting to the system. And I think Rogic, to a degree, has done. I think during his performances in midfield that Nir Bitton has adapted as well to the system as well. So how, if that's the case, why do we look at Turnbull and think he can't adapt? I mean, he's maybe not the first pick as we sit here today, but he started every game that he's been fit to play under Ange Postecoglou.
100%. I think he looks a bit slower than the other midfield players maybe, and I know that sounds strange when you're comparing it with Tom Rogic, because Tom Rogic I don't think is the quickest player either, but his feet are a lot quicker. I like Turnbull, but I think if Hatate and Rogic are playing the way that they're playing, it's hard to see him get back into the team. And I know, every player will get minutes when we play 55, 60 games a season. But it's whether Turnbull's happy with that. If Mr. Cragen's right in what he's saying, he's frustrated, then he might look for a move down in England. But at the same time, he won't be fit until the end of February. If we've got players available and they're firing on all cylinders, you might not get a lot of minutes in the final 3 months of the season. Then, what sort of money can you actually get from him? What sort of team would be interested in him? You're probably looking at a sort of Ryan Christie type transfer to the English Championship. And you can get lost in that league. But, I mean, I think he's a quality player. I think he can fit the system. We played pretty well with him, Rogic and McGregor as a midfield three in the first half of the season. Struggled to break teams down a bit, Livingston, Dundee United and stuff at the start of the season. But I think if he keeps working away, I'm sure Ange will make him a better player. And at that stage, it's whether he wants to stay or go.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with that. Now, James comes in, James McCloskey. Hail from Jim the Tim, South Shields Town, and we are 61 years young, just gone on the 13th of January. Happy birthday to you, Jim the Tim, for South Shields, and thanks for tuning in and getting involved in the chat. Now, last night, we've seen a couple of debuts. In fact, we've seen 3 debuts. Forrest and Jota came back, though, and that didn't go unnoticed as well. So Forrest got some good time in his legs as well. Jota comes back on, sporting a hairband, Lawrence, and the comments were coming through about that as well. And again, it just bolsters the options up top. And what you're hoping for, particularly with Forrest, is that we can get a run of games out of Jamesy now, eh?
So what I'm hoping for Jamesy now with the options is we're not asking him to play 60 games a season and then losing him for a third of those through injury because we're overplaying him. So I think this could be, it could kick Forrest's career up another level again. Like Rodgers did with, he came in, he seemed to rejuvenate it. I think Forrest now having a bit of pressure over him, not having to get rushed back. And a lot of the times it was Jamesy, you were looking to create something, wasn't it? Now there's other players that's going to take the pressure off him. He's not going to get hammered maybe 3 games a week. His body will get a chance to rest. What is he, 29 now? So he's probably getting towards the end of his career. And this could maybe stretch the end of his career out a bit longer, taking the pressure off him and not asking him to play that amount of games?
Well, he's 30. This is his 13th season. Played over 400 games, and in the 400 games, he's been involved in around 200 goals, scorer or assistant. And I think it's a good point that's made there as well, Patrick, in terms of the amount of games. You get some players, I mean, you talk about Callum McGregor, but what you've got to take into account is McGregor's been playing those games within a period aged 21 to 28. You know, Jamesy Forrest came into the team age 17. He's played a hell of a lot of games. And, you know, sometimes injuries catch up with you. Do you think it's a good point Lawrence makes, though, that you pick and choose when you play him? He doesn't play 2-3 games a week?
Yeah, I don't think so. I mean, I don't think he gets in the team 3 times out of 3 in 7 days, especially with Jota. You know, Jota's obviously a left winger, but he can play in the right. Abada can play there. Maeda can play there. You know, you've got Karamoko coming back. He'll be wanting game time if he's going to stay at the club, that is. So, you know, it's not as if Jamesy's our only option anymore. You know, there was that period towards the end of Brendan Rodgers' time, start of Neil Lennon's time. He was the only right winger we had at the club, really, that we could depend on. As you say, he's getting older. You know, how feasible is it to have a 31-year-old, a 32-year-old at right wing? You know, what sort of pace is he going to have at that age? I know he's fast just now, but, you know, that doesn't last forever. So you could move him into midfield. You know, he could become an attacking midfield player. He could become a striker. You just don't know. It'll be interesting to see what happens. I think, you know, he's not everyone's biggest fan. I'm sure quite a few people would be happy if he moved on at the end of his contract. I think in the current climate, you know, when we've been short this season, I think it's good to keep these guys around, especially guys like Forrest that you can rely on. So, but interesting to see what happens. I don't think he'll be playing the 50 games a season like he has been the past couple of years, but he'll chip in with the goals, and he's a player that you can depend on.
Yeah, definitely. I think with all players where their biggest asset a lot of the time has been the pace, and Forrest obviously had the pace. The minute you lose that can become a problem in your later career, and you've seen that with the likes of Michael Owen, our very own Mark Butcher. Once you lose that yard of pace, they are not as effective. But I think if we manage him properly, I'm sure we will manage him properly. I wouldn't expect him to leave. I think he's one of the guys, he's a one-club man. Like a few others, he's in line for a testimonial. He deserves a testimonial, and I hope he finishes his career at Celtic. Some people who won't be finishing their careers at Celtic, though, I would expect to be leaving during the January transfer window. And I've used the 4 examples. I don't know if you agree or disagree, Lawrence, but the 4 that I think we should be working around the clock to move on, because they're not contributing. It's not as if it's going to weaken the squad, really. They're not contributing. Is Barkas, Hatate, Soro, and who's the other one? Bolingoli, you know. He's been out the team so long, I almost forgot about him. That's the 4 players I think we should move on. If they do, though, you've got to strengthen, haven't you?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, Griffiths has already been moved, which I think was the right decision. Yeah, he's injured. It may be harder to move him. I think you look at taking a loss on all of them, aren't you? But whatever you get back in for them, if you get loan fees or anything, you don't get them off the wage bill. If you can get them moved out permanently, it would allow you to go and strengthen then, wouldn't it? The type of weight, I mean, Bolingoli, Ayeti, Barkas, the type of wages they're on, you know, it's a lot more than our Japanese boys will be on. So it's maybe about getting value for money. You know, maybe this is something that Michael's going to do even better than Peter. I don't know. You know, he's brought in some stars that aren't going to be on huge money at the moment.
Or do you just write them off? And I know it's a lot of money, Lawrence, but we're in a situation where the longer it goes on without contributing, the lesser the fee's going to be.
Whatever's left in the contract for on big money, that's what you're in the hole for just now, isn't it? So it's how you can reduce that liability. And it may be a case that you've got to write it off, but you've got to do something to move them, haven't you? Would you take $1 million for a Yeti just now? I'd say yes.
Personally, I would.
I would take $1 million for any of the 4.
Yep.
Perhaps even all of the 4. you know, but it's getting to that stage. It's kind of going.
I would take £1 million for each of those players.
Yep. You know, they're a drain. And if somebody came and says, we'll take all 4 million quid, people know that's pretty decent. And your wage bills, what's Bolly on, about 12? And you'd expect Barkas and Ayeti to be on more than that. Sora's maybe on about 8. So you're maybe saving yourself 50 grand a week on wages. Yeah. Which is a huge drain in a club.
And if you do move the 4 on, Patrick, we're looking probably for 2 to come in, because these guys are not contributing. It's not as if you're losing 30, 40 games off each player a season. You're losing virtually no games if you get all 4 of them off. What's your position on that? Move them on, take what you can get in terms of transfer fees, and try and get a couple of bodies in, or do you think we're of the view that we're finished our transfer business in terms of incomings in January?
I was a bit split in ball and goalie earlier this season, but I think I'd sell him now. You've got so many players. I mean, he played Montgomery ahead of him earlier in the season. He played Scales ahead of him towards the end of December. Taylor appears to be the first choice left back. So there's 3 players ahead of ball and goalie. So I'd certainly move him on. You probably don't even need to replace him because you've got 3 or 4 guys that can play left back. Mm-hmm. When it comes to Barkas, I think we need to sign a keeper anyway, whether you move him out or not, because he's not good enough. I personally think Bain isn't good enough. The only keeper that we can rely on is Joe Hart, I think. So, yeah, definitely move Barkas on. I think me and Lawrence have spoken every single week about how many number 6s we've got in the team. You know, I think we can sell Sova without replacing them. We've got so many bodies in that area. And then Hatate, you probably do need to buy another striker. You know, you get Kyogo who can play there, Maeda. Yakimakis is a sort of different option. So you could maybe look for a 4th choice striker, or a 4th option. But I'd certainly move all 4 on because they're contributing nothing. I think we must have spent about 16 million to bring them in. They're probably on 20 grand a week each. It's unbelievable. I mean, what a waste of money that is.
It is. I mean, even if you were to take it from the kind of first team average, which is about 15, 16 grand, you know, it's 50 grand plus, it's 64 grand. It's outrageous a week in terms of wages, contributing nothing. It's not as if they're playing and you don't fancy them. They're not playing. So, yeah, I think we should be moving mountains to get rid of them. Paddy Lavery's obviously been watching the Celtic Collection, the Retro Video Club that went out at the weekend. Keep Gordon Marshall away from Jota's hair. Absolutely. Gordon Marshall, his wages were so bad, they certainly weren't 16 grand a week, that he had to cut hair on the side. And he was cutting Paul Cooney's hair on that particular video. It did happen. Check it out on the YouTube channel. At last night's game, John Hamm was at Celtic Park. He's a Hollywood actor. What is it, Lawrence, that attracts all these cultural icons from the arts to Celtic Park?
I think it's maybe like Tony Curran and Gianni Capaldi out there doing the Celtic evangelist.
They're selling the club, yeah.
They're evangelists for Celtic out there. Mm-hmm. They're at Jocks or Daly's pub in LA. They're getting the boys round to watch the game. So, you know, I think maybe John Hamm's decided, you know, when in Rome, there's only one place to go.
I absolutely agree with that, and I do love seeing it. You know, going back to the first episode of the Retro Club, there's an interview, Patrick, with Sean Connery, who at that point was a Celtic fan. He's waxing lyrical about his heroes of the 1950s. Of course, he defected to the dark side. What do you think it is about all these Hollywood stars and musicians and artists that you know, Celtic Park attracts them?
I mean, it's a famous atmosphere. It's a famous club. You know, we've got a lot of high-profile fans. I think it's a matter of bringing their mates along. You know, Tommy Sheridan brought Coolio. I'm sure Rod Stewart brought a few of his mates.
Coolio.
I can't think of many others offhand off the top of my head, but you know, I'm sure there's been plenty down the years.
Bob Marley,
you know, Sean Connery. Sorry,
Bob Marley.
Bob Marley's was a fan, absolutely.
I don't think he made it to the ground though. That was one of his big regrets, wasn't it?
Yes, he's certainly a fan. We had a good chat actually with Tony Curran. We were speaking to Tony in the penalty spot in Sword Street in Glasgow. If you're in the area, drop in for Celtic memorabilia. And we were talking to Tony Curran, and we spoke about, imagine them making a film. Imagine them making a Celtic film, because it is, you know, the type of movie that could be on the silver screen. And I asked Tony who he would play. And I think he said Tommy Gemmell, didn't he? Tommy Gemmell. Who would play Jock Stein? You know, if it was a Hollywood blockbuster, who would play Stein? There's a question for you, Lawrence.
See, I struggle because I don't watch films, I watch Celtic, so it's kind of, I don't know, Liam Neeson maybe, I don't know. Could a big man play the big man?
That's a good shout, Liam Neeson.
Could he change his accent for it?
I do like that. I like that. I always liked the idea of Jim Broadbent. He's getting a bit old now, but he had a look, he had that kind of presence. But Liam Neeson, yeah, I think I could see him playing Big Jock.
Was it Tony Curran's uncle or granddad that scouted Danny McGrain?
Yeah, Danny McGrain. Yeah, it was his granddad.
How cool is that?
I know. I know.
His granddad scouted Danny McGrain for Celtic.
Nice bit of trivia. Nice bit of trivia, absolutely. So finally, Same old Alaba, always cheating. Are we going to beat them at the weekend? That's a big question. The second question, though, Patrick, how do we line up? I mean, we've had a lot of injuries. It seems as though, obviously, there's a period of people adapting and bodies adapting to the training and the intensity of the training. And you would expect a lot of these injuries to settle down in the second half of the season. So there's players needing game time. There's maybe players that are suggesting that they need rested. I don't think we rest anybody. We go out there with the strongest team we possibly can against Alloa at the weekend. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, it's a matter of who the strongest team is, really, because if Jota's coming back from injury, that could be a game that you play him in, because I don't think him coming in weakens the team, whereas he could do with the minutes. Could maybe give Ralston a game. It's just about, rotating the squad but keeping the strength. I don't think Ralston weakens the team too much, especially not against a team like Alloa. I'm not sure what league they're in, but I think they're having a half-decent season. So you don't want to underestimate these teams. You need to take the game seriously. I'm sure Ange will. And if we play a very good standard team, players like Ralston coming in, Jota coming in, and we play our game, I think we'll go through. No problem.
What's your position on that, Lawrence? I never underestimate. I mean, listen, we've seen what happens when you go to these places and it all goes Pete Tong, as they say. I mean, I posted a couple of pictures recently of that Clyde game, Roy Keane's debut. They beat us. And by the way, they should have beat us by more than 2-1. Sean Maloney played that day, I think.
So did they.
He did. He's only put appearance for Celtic, hooked at half-time. Went on to win 71 caps for China, by the way. But, I mean, you approach that with the strongest possible team. You've got to continue this momentum and, of course, this run that we're on as well.
Yeah, I wouldn't be making any changes. I would try and get 2 or 3 up before doing any changes there. Mm-hmm. I think, try and get the defence settled, and say, look, this is it. Also, they want to get partnerships with the guys in front of them, don't they? I know we've had 3 weeks off and just had to work with them, but I don't think anything beats doing it on the park. So I think start with the same team, try and get 2 or 3 up, and then make your changes. Yeah,
absolutely. Keep the suggestions coming in the comment section as to who should be playing who. We're making a movie on Celtic. Liam Neeson is playing Jock Stein, and we've got a suggestion that Russell Crowe could play somebody from David Fletcher. I'm not sure he'd play. I'll tell you what, Russell Crowe would play a good Sean Fallon. I could see him playing Sean Fallon. Snick67 suggests Daniel Day-Lewis could play Jock Stein as well. Day-Lewis, I'm thinking he's retired though, isn't he, from acting?
Who would be the mock?
Who would be the mock? I think
Mark
I think his son would need to play him.
You think so?
Yeah.
In later years, though. Early years, what about Compston?
Compston could play the mock. Yeah, absolutely. Listen, we're on the casting director's couch here. I love the idea. One of the days...
I'm not on any casting director's couch, maybe, but...
Well, we're here. I would like to see it in my lifetime. We'll be back tomorrow at 12:30. Patrick, an absolute pleasure. Hopefully, I was able to sit in the big man's seat comfortably for 60 minutes there. The superstar that is Declan will be back on Thursday. Got to thank everybody for getting involved in the comments section. Thanks for joining us on A Celtic State of Mind. Make sure that you subscribe if you're on the YouTube channel. And all that's left for me to say is Lawrence Conley and Patrick McGill, thanks once again for joining me on A Celtic State of Mind.